Hello and welcome to Fight News Now Extra. It's John Pollock with you, and we've got all of the stories that are making news in the world of mixed martial arts. Stick around as we will debate them all with John Ramdine and Robin Black stepping in as we are discussing yet another retirement. TJ Grant speaks his mind on the actions of another fighter, and Tim Kennedy chooses the wrong target to speak out on. Liverkick.com is reporting that 39-year-old kickboxer and mixed martial artist Semmy Schilt is retiring following a stellar career where he was a four-time K1 World Grand Prix champion, amassing a record of 43-6-1 in the kickboxing world while maintaining a 26-14-1 record in mixed martial arts. His last fight was this past December where he defeated Daniel Guita by TKO. Schilt cited a heart condition that will prevent him from fighting again. TJ Grant was very vocal in speaking to Gareth Davies of The Telegraph in the UK this week. The lightweight title challenger said it was a dirty move and low class by Anthony Pettis to try and take his title shot against Benson Henderson at UFC 164 after Pettis was injured for his own featherweight title shot that was scheduled against Jose Aldo. Grant will challenge champion Benson Henderson on August 31st in Milwaukee. Tim Kennedy is the latest fighter to publicly complain about fighter pay. However, he remains an active UFC fighter. Kennedy was on the Grapple Talk podcast stating that he works a secondary job and it's very difficult to live off the salary he makes solely from the UFC. Kennedy stated he will make $55,000 at UFC 162, but will only take home $20,000 of that figure once he pays all of his expenses attached with his camp. And UFC welterweight Matt Brown has Thiago Alves next on deck coming up August 17th in Boston. But in an interview with the Bleacher Report, the Immortal One spoke of his chances against reigning champion George St. Pierre. In the interview, Brown said his wrestling skill would surprise a lot of people. He would stand right in the pocket with St. Pierre and force him to trade, and would destroy the current champion if they were to fight. And we are joined by John Ramdine and Robin Black. And let's do some housekeeping first. You were away this past week where news came out that Miesha Tate will be in ESPN's The Body Issue. And the people want to know on YouTube what your reaction is to this.
Awesome.
That's great. Fantastic.
It is awesome.
We spent 3 minutes discussing this the other day.
I think that's all we need to say. Awesome. I mean, half-naked Miesha Tate.
Well, a man who did not get the nod for the ESPN Body Issue is Semmy Schilt, who is retiring at the age of 39. Segue. This man, let's chat about Semmy Schilt for maybe the UFC fan that may not have heard the name Semmy Schilt, because
that means they haven't been watching very long because he used to fight in the UFC.
Well, that was a decade ago, over a decade ago for his two fights in the UFC. But nonetheless, here was a guy nearly 7 feet tall, 86-inch reach, and someone that knew how to use that reach, and many would say the best heavyweight kickboxer of all time.
And that was the key to his success. He knew how to use his size, and I've spoken to many crews and many kickboxers out there who they have to marvel at his abilities to use his reach, to use that front kick, but they hate the fact that he was able to use his size to his advantage, and he won 4 K1 World Grand Prix championships because of it. But what it does is it opens up things right now for the heavyweight division for somebody out there to claim the #1 spot. And when I was in New York City, I had a chance to talk to Rico Verhoeven, who's only 24 years of age, and he says, once all these dinosaurs, once they get out, I'm going to be the new king.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, a guy like John Jones really, that was pioneered by Semmy Schilt, that sort of approach that he takes while standing, and a lot of other guys like that. But what's interesting about Schilt is he almost had that kind of Brett Favre vibe where he could pass from that old era to that middle era to recent era and be a champion throughout, to be that good. And you miss a guy like that. But you're right, when you say goodbye to a great warrior like that, young guys now get a chance to go up and blaze a new trail.
Tim Kennedy, he was speaking this week regarding fighter pay, which is becoming a bigger topic in terms of people publicly talking about it. We always hear stuff off the record from guys who will complain about stuff, but an interesting tack taken by Tim Kennedy, who is still an active fighter with the UFC, about to make his UFC debut coming up next weekend, and pretty much breaking it down in terms of, $55,000, but let's break this all down from all the things I have to pay with between medicals, between coaches, trainers, and I'm going to take home $20,000 here for this.
Well, one of the reasons why Tim Kennedy says it is because he has options. A guy like Jacob Volkman, he's a chiropractor, so he can say these things because he has something to fall back on. Of course, they all want to be paid as athletes, Tim Kennedy and Volkman. But if you have something to fall back on, you're more than happy to come out and say, look, this just isn't right. Tim Kennedy, I'm sure, could be a military soldier for the rest of his life in some capacity. So I think that's why a guy like Tim Kennedy can come out there and say these things, because, you know, he's a voice for many that can't speak out.
Yeah, and it was a great interview on Grapple Talk. Carlin does a really nice interview. People should hear the whole thing. But you know what, man? Like, it's a risky thing. Like, yes, you got other things to fall back on. Yeah, you want to say the right things, but you don't know. We don't know what how the bosses view an active fighter talking this way. It's a very risky thing to go and speak out against your employer at any job. I'm not going to say that the head of the Fight Network is some kind of lunatic or does something bad or, you know, steals cars. Like, that's just crazy. And, you know, I'm not sure that he's going to, or whether or not he's going to regret talking like that.
I don't think he cares. I think, you know what? He said, I believe that he thinks that this has to be said because they can't just continue to sweep this under the rug. You mentioned the numbers, and how is somebody, a professional athlete, supposed to survive when they're getting paid $60,000 a year? That's if you fight 3 times in that calendar year.
I think it's a hard topic, though, for a lot of fans that are watching this. I think 60 grand a year, that's great. That's, you know, that's livable if you have to.
Kicked in the head? No, it is absolutely
not.
not.
You know, the devil's advocate here is that, you know, there is obviously a pecking order in the UFC, and Tim Kennedy, let's be honest here, is not going to generate the business that a Chris Weidman or Anderson Silva is for this card, and maybe $60,000, that's the going rate for a middle-of-the-pack fighter.
I would love to see these guys get paid way more. You know what they go through, you know what they sacrifice. And if you look at sports, you compare them to a football player or a hockey player, they're getting paid terrible. But if you compare them to entertainment, when you're a garage band and then you're a bar band and then you're a touring band, before you get, you know, the big deal and get on the radio, you don't make much money. And I think that's the comparison the UFC would like us to make. But these guys got to get paid
But the
more.
UFC is supposed to be the NFL. This is supposed to be the highest level of mixed martial arts, and I think these athletes...
And it is.
It is, but I mean...
And they're getting away with what they're paying right now. I mean, I think the onus somewhat what here becomes on the fighters here. Get together, do something. The UFC isn't going to, out of the goodness of their heart, start spending more money when they don't have to. But we have more of Fight News Now Extra, and it is coming your way right now.